So we're going to go through all of the steps in activity-based costing for exercise 5-4. And the first thing that I want to do is just read the required. In A, it says to compute the activity rate for each activity cost pool. B says to compute the amount of overhead cost applied to each product during the year. And C is to calculate over or under applied manufacturing overhead. So if we implement the 7 steps when we're designing an activity-based costing system, we will automatically answer these 3 requireds. Okay, so we're going to get started. Sullivan Company uses activity-based costing to determine product costs for external financial reports. Some of the entries have been completed to the manufacturing overhead account for the current year, as shown below. So this is the actual. So what we're really trying to do is figure out what the amount of applied is, because that's what we're using activity costing for, is for the manufacturing overhead. That's the applied portion. Okay, so at the beginning of the year, the company made the following estimates of cost and activity for its 5 activity pools. So this is all estimated information. So that's enough that I need to do step 6, which is to calculate the predetermined overhead rate. So I'm not going to read any further. I'll look at the actual activity when I do step 7, but this is good enough for step 6. So I have the activity cost pools. I've got the estimated overhead costs. I have the expected activity. And then this is the activity measure. This is how we're going to measure each activity. So this part is step 1 and 2. So step 1 is to identify activities and create an activity dictionary. Step 2 is to create activity cost pools. So this will always be done for us. Then step 3 is to identify the resources consumed by individual activity cost pools. And step 4 is identify the activity measure for each activity cost pool. So this would be step 3, and this would be step 4. Then step 5 is to estimate the total activity volume for each measure. So this is done for us here. So all we need to do is step 6. So just find the predetermined overhead rate. So this is just very similar to job costing. What you do is you take the estimated manufacturing overhead cost and divide that by your estimated activity. So what we're saying is for 1 direct labor hour, it costs us $16. Then for purchase orders, take your estimate, 42,000 divided by 1,500, because that's how many orders we think we're going to do in a year. And then that gives me $28. So I'm going to assign $28 per purchase order. With parts, we'll do 348 and then divide that by 400. So in this one, we're assuming that it's 870 per part. Board etching will take 460,000 divided by 2,000 boards, and that gives us 230 per board. And then general factory is 520,000, and we're going to divide that by 80,000, and I'm assuming HMs might be machine hours. So that would give me $650 per machine hour. So I'm just going to change that. So these predetermined overhead rates are calculated at the beginning of the year. So I'll just put in yellow what I've calculated. So that's step 6. Now, step 7 happens when we start the product and when we complete the project or the product. So we have 4 products, A, B, C, and D. And here's the actual activity. So that's just the total. If I add all of those products up, that comes to 41,000 direct labor hours. This one comes to 1,300 purchase orders and so on. But what I want to do is price these out individually. So I can actually just copy my activity cost pool, and maybe we'll just do it over here, just so I have some room. So there's my activity cost pools, and then I have my products A, B, C, and D. So I'll put that up here. And then these are how I'm measuring my activity, so I'll also put that in here as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, I'll show you how to do A, and then I'll do B again, and then I'll quickly do C and D. So all you need to do is take the actual activity for A. So for labor hours, I have 13,500 direct labor hours, and then you just multiply that by the predetermined overhead rate, which is 16. And so that comes out to $216,000 that I'm assigning to product A for manufacturing overhead applied. Then with purchase orders, I'll do the same. Go equals, and then we have 90 actual purchase orders for A. I'm going to multiply that by the predetermined overhead rate, which was $28. And then I get $25.20. Parts management, just go equals. I'm going to take the 70 actual parts for product A and then just multiply that by the 870. So that's what we said a part was going to be costed at. So that's 60,900. Then board etching, we're going to take 450 boards, and then we'll multiply that by $230. Then machine hours, we're going to take actual machine hours, so that's 24,000, and then we're going to multiply that by $6.50. So for product A, if I just add all of this up, that comes to $5,308,920. And what we're calculating here is the applied manufacturing overhead. So let's do it again for product B. So I'm going to take the actual activity for product B. So we said for labor hours, product B has 7,500. So if I quickly look at product A, we use 13,500. So I know product B's labor costs are going to be lower. So 7,500 times by 16. So that gives me $120,000. With purchase orders, product B has 350. So this is going to be higher than A because A only had 90. So I'm going to take 350 and then times that by the same predetermined overhead rate. So notice that for all of the products, the activity is changing, but I'm using the same predetermined overhead rates on all of them. So that one's 9,800. For parts management, I'm going to take the 115 and then I'm going to multiply that by the 870. With boards, I'm going to take the 1,000 and then I'm going to multiply that by our predetermined overhead rate for boards, which is 230. And then general factory, I'm going to take the 20,000 and then just multiply that by the 650. And so I'll add that one up as well. So you can just add all of those. So you're going to do the process 2 more times. I'll just show you how to do this if you don't want to keep doing it over and over again. What we can do is we can just lock down the last part of the cell so it'll keep taking the same predetermined overhead rate. So if I just highlight that and press F4, you'll see it change these to put $1 in front of the E and $1 in front of the 16. And I'll do that on the second one. I'll just highlight it and press F4. I'll do that on the third one, highlight it and press F4. I'll do this on this one, highlight it and press F4, and then highlight that one and press F4. Not 4, F4. Just a second, I gotta undo what I just did. So highlight it and press F4. So now what I can do is just highlight all of the boxes and just drag my formula over, and then it'll take the same pattern. So for example, with product C, it's going to take the 10,500, and it's going to just multiply it by the 16. So now what we can do is just add all of this up together. So if I just go equals this plus this plus this plus this, that number gives me 2,085,300. So that's going to be our applied manufacturing overhead. So I'll take that applied and I'm going to put it in this T account. So that's the one that we calculated. So just remember, whenever we do a product, it will move through all of our inventory accounts. So as we make it, we'll put it into the WIP. So then you'll have direct labor, direct materials, and then this applied manufacturing overhead. And then once you're finished making the product, you move it out of WIP into finished goods. And then once you sell the product, you move it out of finished goods into cost of goods sold. So now I'm just trying to think if I'm over or under. So if I compare this to my actual, it looks like I didn't apply enough, so I'm under applied. Another way to look at it is just take your applied and then subtract your actual. See what that gives us here. This minus this. So if it ends up being in brackets, that means it's under applied. If it's not in brackets, then it's over applied. And then we'll end up flushing the under applied out into cost of goods sold because we want to zero out this account at the end of the fiscal year. Now, just remember, my best case scenario was to use the actual, but I didn't know what the actual was until the end of the year, and I was making products throughout the year. So we were just using our best guess. And us being off by about 170,700 isn't that bad. Now I'm just going to extend this activity. It's not a part of this question. So I actually already answered part A, B, and C. So I'm just going to compare this to a traditional costing system. So when I say traditional, I mean job costing. So what if I said, what if we use job costing, and I'll just say traditional instead. Let's pretend we based our predetermined overhead rate on direct labor hours. What would the over or under applied overhead be? So we'll just do the same calculation for predetermined overhead rate. So estimated manufacturing overhead, and we get that from the estimate. So here's all of the estimated overhead, so I'm just going to total that up. I'm just going to sum it. So it's 2,010,000, and then we're just going to divide that by our estimated cost driver, which is direct labor hours because I just said it was. So if I look at what my estimated direct labor hours are, it's 40,000. So we're not going to bother breaking it down based off of activities like we did here. We're just going to use labor hours. And job costing is a lot simpler and quicker to implement. So I just have one single overhead rate. So that's going to be $50.25. So that's your predetermined overhead rate. So now what I'm going to do is multiply that by the actual labor hours. So let's see, actual direct labor hours. So if I look at my actual activity, it's 41,000. So I'll just use 41,000. So my applied manufacturing overhead, so I'm just doing this for total. You could do it by product as well and then add it up. So my actual applied manufacturing overhead is 2060250. So if I wanted to use this one instead of activity-based costing, then I would take my applied overhead and then subtract your actual manufacturing overhead, which was this number, the 2256000. That will give us, still under applied, by $195,750. But if I used activity-based costing, my projection would have been a little bit more accurate because I have only 170,700 under applied. So the activity-based costing is supposed to give us a more accurate projection and move us closer to the actual than job costing does, and that's just the difference.